Oh, well.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is IDAGIO Live. This is Thomas Hampson. It's Thursday, so I must be visiting with somebody I know nothing about or I really like a lot. But that's the fun thing about music, because actually IDAGIO Live is the place where classical music happens, and we happens every Thursday with all sort of we's. I love that. We's happening. We happen. Oh, I'm a little giddy. I've had actually a good day. Yesterday was not a good day. Today was a good day. Anyway, we're having a good time visiting with a lot of people from the industry, from the musicians, and sometimes I get to actually get people that I absolutely adore and have adored for a long time. And tonight it is the inimitable, unbelievable, wonderful, gracious Denyce Graves. Good evening, darling. How are you?
I think I would like to take you everywhere I go for that introduction. That was wonderful. I'm
I
terrific.
can tape it. I can put it on an iPhone. You can just take it with you. No, seriously, it is great to see you. Sorry, what?
It is a greeting on my cell phone.
Exactly. It's wonderful to see you. We don't see each other enough. In fact, about the only time we ever see each other is when I come to Washington, Washington, D.C., that is, which was, I think the last time we saw each other was at the Kennedy Honors last year, which was quite exciting and wonderful.
That's right. I always look forward to that. Yeah, that was a pleasure. That's right. Oh, you've got
But all of this, I'm sure that most of our viewers and listeners know your work and know who you are and watch you on all the various tributes and specials that you have been in the last years in Washington, D.C. And it's really quite wonderful. The last one, which was deeply moving, was for and I say every singer in this business that had the pleasure and privilege of meeting the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg became sort of part of her orbit. And some of us shared more close time than others. I know you did as well as I. She was an extraordinary human being, and it broke my heart. I know Jim Ginsburg quite well. It broke my heart that I couldn't come to the memorial, but COVID wouldn't have it. But it was a beautiful service, and you were beautiful. You were just wonderful. It was really gorgeous. So, God bless Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Absolutely.
And that's all the political nonsense. That's the only political news you're going to get tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go straight to music. I've asked Denyce, kind of warned her. What I love to do is sort of say, okay, you've got 2.5, 3 minutes. You're at the Rotary Club, and nobody knows who the hell you are. You've been there, right? Been there, done that. So you get to tell people, who you are. Where did you grow up? Where did you? What was sort of the early Wikipedia blush of the wonderful Denyce Graves up until when you became Denyce Graves?
Born and raised in Washington, D.C. with my brother, my sister, my mom. Attended the DC public schools until I got to the Performing Arts High School. Had a music teacher there in my junior high school who encouraged me to sing in the all-city chorus. And then she told me about the Performing Arts High School, went there, auditioned for the high school, got accepted in the high school, heard, with Washington Opera, was afforded the opportunity to go to dress rehearsals and that sort of things of the opera. I went to Beethoven's Fidelio. And I said, oh my goodness, what is that? And what is this? This is something that I would love to do. Went as a teenager and lived in Germany, actually, did an exchange program and lived with a family in Munich for a while. That was an amazing experience. Came back, graduated high school early, left home when I was just about 16. Then went to do my undergraduate at Oberlin College Conservatory in Ohio. Left there and then went to New England Conservatory. Oberlin had at that time a mandatory age retirement, and my voice teacher, who had been a big draw, Helen Hodem, who'd been a draw for the conservatory for many years, they hadn't been enforcing that for her. She was sort of an ambiguous, mysterious age. And then some of the other professors said, look, you can't enforce that for some and not for others. So she was forced to leave Oberlin, and there were about 14 of us who left Oberlin College to go to New England Conservatory to finish studying with her. I was amongst those. And then finished at New England Conservatory, then won the Met competition, then went to Houston Grand Opera, did Young Artist Program, and then after that, things started happening. Marilyn Horne got sick in a production of Carmen with San Francisco Opera, I was called in at the last minute to einspringen, and then my life became very different.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, one of the reasons I'm excited to talk about, I was going to save this a bit later, but I have to tell you that every young artist from America, or a younger singer from America, that I've had on this podcast series in either the Tuesdays or the Thursdays. And in fact, I misspoke. This is Tuesday. I'm completely hallucinating. I'm way ahead of myself. This is Tuesdays. This is Ham Song Foundation with the IDAGIO.com Song and Beyond series. I apologize. Well, anyway, that's the fun thing of live promotion. Anyway, but every young person I've had on here, I mean, I really think every one of them has said, when they talk about their early life, a life-changing moment for them, and especially your colleagues of color, the African-American young singers I've had on here have all said, I went to the opera, I didn't really want to, and I saw Denyce Graves, and I thought, my God, she looks like me, I look like her, and that's happening there. I can do this too. You have been such a phenomenal role model. You know that anyway, but sometimes we really need to hear it. I don't think we can possibly estimate what impacts we have sometimes, but I really want to say that to you. I don't think I just can't imagine you actually know how many perhaps destitute lives you've impacted. Perhaps, young African-American singers that thought, what the hell am I going to do in this business? What can I do about this? This is, this isn't for me. I got this chop, but what am I going to do with it? And you showed up. Now, I get to go and say, I just heard about you. And of course I went, I think it was when you're doing Carmen at the Met, so I got my ticket and went, well, let's just have a look at this. Actually, I think I went to hear you because I didn't know you. I hadn't ever met you before, and everybody was talking about you. But we were supposed to do this recording, which we did do, the Hamlet. It was about all in the same time, I think. But never mind. So there's not a question in there. I just want you to wear that mantle of adoration and mentoring, even for those that you maybe haven't, for I'm sure many that you haven't met. It's wonderful. And it's great to have you on this series. It's great for people to see you. And I'm going to shut up and let you talk some more. So was this school was the high school? First of all, a couple of things. You left home, but the high school was the Duke Ellington School? Was it called that then?
Duke Ellington School of the Performing Arts.
Isn't it? And that was your high school?
It was. It's a beautiful story. It is
so please.
Beautiful story that I've told so much, but it bears repeating because it's just so gorgeous. I was in the first day of elementary school, of kindergarten. I was a really, really shy, awkward kid who wasn't very popular at all, even in kindergarten. And it remained that way until I graduated high school, actually. But anyway, I didn't enjoy going to school. I didn't want to go to school until they took me to music class. And they took me to music class and I fell in love. And from that moment on, I wanted to go all the time. And there was a wonderful woman who was my music teacher who, how often we went, I don't know, twice a week or something like that. And we'd sing little songs. And I just fell in love with music. I fell in love with her. And then as I continued to go on, maybe by the 5th or 6th grade, she would give me little solos, a couple measures to sing. Well, anyway, when I graduated to go to junior high school, unbeknownst to both of us, I was walking down the hall one day, ran into her in the hallway. Oh my goodness, Miss Grove was her name, Judith Grove. Oh my goodness, Miss Grove, what are you doing? She's now the music teacher at this junior high school. So she got me involved and told me about All City Chorus. And so she would come and pick me up from my home on Saturday, take me to All City Chorus rehearsal, stay with me all day for those 3-4 hours, bring me back home. When it was time to graduate junior high school, to go to high school, ran into her. She said, Denyce, you've got a pretty voice. There's a school, a performing arts high school in Washington, in Georgetown, called the Duke Ellington School. And I think that you should audition for it. She got the application. We filled out the application together, did the audition. I sang You Light Up My Life. I don't know if you remember that. And
yeah.
And then she became the principal of the school.
Oh, I love it.
So this woman was literally my guardian angel. So if you say that my life has been used in a way that inspires young people, and I think that we're all being used in that way, all of us, all the time, whether we choose to that sort of responsibility or not, where our lives are always an example to others. But this woman was a real guardian angel. She set me on this path that
Wow.
I mean, I owe her an incredible debt of gratitude, and she's still alive, and she's still a very, very dear friend. She's a friend of the family now. I mean, I just can't believe it, but it was this woman who really steered and guided me to this beautiful profession.
She must have been beside herself to go to the opera and see you as a star. And
Oh, when 60 Minutes did a story on me some years ago, and they interviewed her, and you know, she was there for my Met debut along with my mother and friends of mine, crying. You know, little Denyce, she remembers when I was 5 years old, and I understand that. You know, just an incredible woman who went far beyond anything that was expected or required from her job, and so many others like her who. You know, you talked about some of us opera singers who inspire other artists, and then that takes their life on a completely different course. I mean, that's certainly the case for me. You know, it was because discovering opera, discovering classical music really changed the trajectory of my life. It really gave me a sense of purpose. And,
but I get the feeling that music was from the get. Do you have brothers and sisters, and were your parents musical?
Okay, so I come from a family that loves to sing. Everybody loves to sing. Whether we want to call them musical, they've got the gift of song in their hearts. Let's say that.
Is this a Von Trapp family?
Right. Well, my brother and my sister both sing. They have beautiful voices, and my family, actually, my mother's an extraordinary woman, extraordinary. And she raised the three of us on her own and was, you know, working several jobs. She worked 3 jobs, but because of that, we were sort of the original latchkey kids, right? So we'd come home from school, and in addition to our schoolwork, she assigned us work. So you either had a week to cook, you had a week to clean, a week to do the dishes, and in addition to that, each night of the week she assigned for something. So Monday night was book report night, right? And Tuesday night, music night. And she would assign us homework and say, I want you to do a report on, you know, I don't know what, snowshoe rabbits or something, that we had to show her when she came home from school. One of the nights was designated for music night. So she got us a little Casio keyboard, and we just would joke around. And my brother and my sister would make up these songs, and we'd sing them for her on Saturday. And she said, you know, it's a shame that nobody gets to hear this. You should sing this at church. So so we would sing these little songs that we made up on church. But my brother who has a gorgeous voice, my sister too, always sang the solos. And I was the real timid one, and the one who was always hiding behind my mother's skirt. And one day in church, my brother said that he wasn't well, he couldn't sing. And so my mother said, Denyce, you have to sing the solo. And I said, you know, I can't do that. I mean, I can't possibly do that. And she sort of pushed me in front of the congregation. And so that, along with this music teacher, was creating who I am still becoming.
Wow.
So
was it always sing? Did you learn keyboard or play a violin or any other instrument?
No, we didn't. I mean, my brother played the trombone, but we didn't study any musical instruments. My sister and I would sing, and we'd create these harmonies, and we, you know, would sing these songs that we would sing in church. And we were known as, you know, the Graves kids. And my mother titled us the inspirational children of God, and that's what we were. And we go around to different churches and sing. But I was, you know, one of the backup, you know, fly girls. My brother was the, you know, lead on all of those things. So that's sort of, all of that stuff was very, very much in the part of the making of who I was later to become.
So by the time you got through Duke Ellington, and was it always by high school had the classical thing bit, or did you get some, as we all got at that age, some pressure of musical comedy or Broadway, and that's sort of the American thing, and what's this, all this classical music stuff? I remember a touching conversation with my mother when my career was starting to talk about, Tommy, you were always very musical, and I pretty voice, and I love you dearly, and it's fantastic, but I really have to ask, why opera? It was very sweet. And I said, well, Mom, it's a legitimate question. And she's become a bug after that. I don't mean to make fun of my gorgeous, wonderful mother, but it was in America, sometimes that can be kind of well, why would you go towards that? So when did this classical music thing happen?
Right. So that happened early on. That happened 13 years old. And a girlfriend of mine had heard a recording, and she said, Denyce, you have got to come to the library and hear something that I just heard. And I said, no, I can't, I'm late, for a class. And she said, you've got to come hear this. I just heard something that was, I don't even know what it was extraordinary. And so we went into the listening library. She put on this recording and time was suspended. My breath stopped. I said, what is that? And we listened to that recording, play to the end, and say, play it again. Get to the end, play it again. Finally, there was a knock on the door. It was a custodian. It was 8 p.m. We passed, I don't know how many hours in there, the entire day and into the evening. We didn't eat. We didn't go to the bathroom. We spent the entire day listening to Leontine sing Puccini arias. And from that day, she and I sort of made a pact, okay, that's what we're gonna do. That's what we're gonna do with our lives. And so she and I went to Germany together. We studied there. We went to Oberlin College together. We were roommates. We were studying in the conservatory. And we were gonna set out on this path, that very moment that I heard, her singing that, what in the world was this? So I was bit pretty early by the classical bug, and I never got involved actually at all or in musical theater. My daughter is now interested in musical theater and singing, but that was not something that I was exposed to. I also come from an incredibly religious family. And so my father's a minister, and the only thing that was allowed in our house was gospel music. So we weren't allowed to listen to, the devil's music. So we could, we would sneak, when my mother wasn't home, and listen to the Jackson 5 or, whoever it was we were listening to. But basically it was, Mahalia Jackson and the Mighty Clouds of Joy and Shirley Caesar and all these wonderful artists. That's who we heard all the time, in the house. So for me, hearing this classical music was something that really caused, what in the world was this? But like you with your family and like with your mother, that the idea of wanting to pursue this did not really play well. I mean, that landed really, like, where is this coming from? What are you talking about?
Exactly.
And I was at Oberlin in my second year. My mother said to me in a conversation, she said, Denyce, look, and also, before that time, she said, what do you mean you want to go to school to sing? You already know how to sing. What do you mean? I mean, you go to college, right, to become a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. You can even get a degree in singing. I mean, singing? What are you going to do with that? And after my second year at Oberlin, my mother we had a heart-to-heart conversation. She said, look, Denyce, look, I know that you like singing, but what are you planning to do with your life? What do you want to teach singing? Or
I know that conversation. For the guy, it's, how do you supposed to, you're going to be able to support your life, and if you have a family, I mean, I get the singing thing, but I mean, this is not an occupation. Actually, my dad was right. You got to be damn lucky to, you got to have a lot of things go right to make a living. Right. Making a living as a passionate artist and singer is a gift. Of course, we work like dogs, but you cannot deny that stars have to line up and things have to happen. You have to take care of yourself. I love it. So, but when you were in Oberlin,
yeah,
weren't people sort of saying, golly gosh, that's pretty special?
Yeah, it's
Or
true.
did it happen more? Did that happen more in New England Conservatory in Boston, where perhaps the panorama of life is slightly larger than the fields of Oberlin?
Both true. No, it actually happened early on at Oberlin. You know, I went there as a prospective student. I asked the students, who's the teacher, who's the voice teacher that everybody wants to study with? I did a great audition. I remember what I sang for that too. There was a little bit of buzz. And so when I arrived on the campus, then as a student, I was asked to sing right away in studio class. And so there was a little bit of buzz about this girl who's coming from
Mm,
Washington, D.C., who
mm.
had this big old voice. And we didn't know what the voice was. We didn't know, well, we didn't really think I was ever a soprano, but we didn't know if I was a mezzo or contralto or what exactly the voice was, but that it was, you
But
know,
you've always had a very long voice. And
well,
I mean, the timbre I can't imagine to everybody. I mean, if you were a soprano, it was going to be one hell of a dramatic soprano. But I mean, I would imagine that because of timbre, your speaking voice, everything about you says mezzo. But I know that you have quite a long range.
well, I'm not sure how much of that still remains. I mean, I'm singing it, but things have changed over the years. But I've always had a very wide range. That's true. I mean, a very, very long, long range. But these days it seems to be going towards, your Fach. Uh,
Well, we're not going to talk about that for either one of us right now. When you talk about listening to Leontine, when you were sort of getting into all of this back in the day, as they say, did you listen to a lot of recordings of different singers?
I did, of course. I mean,
You know that that's still a contentious point in a lot of our colleagues, a lot of our teaching colleagues. You shouldn't listen to recordings, which I think is complete BS.
oh, no,
It
no,
makes
no.
sense. Oh, look at you. I love it. Oh no. How bad would that?
I
What?
fell in love. That's what we had also in the beginning. I mean, that's really all we had available to us. I was fortunate sometimes to be able to go to the Kennedy Center and, as I said, sit in on, final dress rehearsals or that sort of thing, which was an incredible, amazing experience. But that's what we had available to us. I mean, I remember in high school falling in love with Cavalleria Rusticana, just falling in love with it. And something beautiful that happened, I'm just reminded of it now. I'd gone to Germany and lived with this family, and I came back, and playing that around the house was not something that was, welcomed either. My brother and my sister, how long is all of that,
Yeah.
cacophonous ruckus going to be going on? And
Yeah.
I've been away from home for a long time, and I came back, and my sister said, "I've got a surprise for you." And she had found my recording of Frederica von Stade singing Voi che sapete, and she learned it, and she sang
Heaven.
it for me, and just I'm just remembering that now.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember when I worked for Flicker for the first time. In fact, my debut at the Met was the Count and Linus de Figaro, and she was Cherubino. I mean, well, the cast, I won't even get into that, but it was just, but she, and we became fast friends. She's an amazing lady. She's still going strong, apparently still singing every so often and mentoring a lot of people out in the San Francisco area. I want to get her on the show as well. The thing about listening to music, I want to just kind of drive that point home again. I mean, today it is more easy than ever with streaming platforms like IDAGIO. I mean, you and I have been through the whole generation of cassette decks and LPs, and behind me is my record collection. I was a record collector before I had any sense. But I've always just enjoyed both the phenomenon of recording and just listening to all kinds of different music and that sort of thing. But the singing thing, I came a little bit later to it than even you did. So once it started to grab my imagination, especially in the song repertoire, I wanted to know how many people did that, and I wanted to know what other songs have been written, and I wanted to know, and then I had to learn arias for competitions, and well, how did that? And then all of a sudden, I put on this one record, and here was Robert Merrill. You
Oh,
know, pouring out that unbelievably beautiful baritone voice. And I thought, Yeah, I get into that. I get that. I won't name the other ones that I thought, well, that's okay, but I mean, I don't want to sound like that. But then there was this, there was just something, like you said, there's something that clicks and goes, oh my God, that's really quite interesting. And then, but I must say, I came more to classical music through song. It really bit me that poetry could be set to music. And of course German poetry, when I learned a little German in high school. But I came late because I was also raised in a very religious atmosphere. I went to parochial academy. I was a Seventh-day Adventist, so I was in boarding school until I was 17. I graduated when I was just before I turned 18 years old. So it was a lot of closed door, and there was an awful lot of music, and really good music. A little bit of spirituals, as they would claim that emotion for themselves. Not much gospel music, because that could lead to hand clapping, and that's out of the question. And classical music, yes, the Grieg this and the Tchaikovsky that, but certainly not opera. So I know how that development thing goes, and I'm just fleshing it off in both of our stories here, because I think we're going to have a lot of our young colleagues looking at this program, the two of us smiling and remembering and talking about it. And I just want to reinforce to all of them the natural path of enlightened ignorance that everyone travels. and it's the ones that know in their heart, well, no, that can't be wrong. I've got to listen to that. I've got to go there. Trust that inner voice. It's worth your time, and don't teacher shop. Stick with it. It's things like that. But I just, every colleague I talk to, and especially in this series, of any stature experience and any instrument, has kind of the same story. Stephen Rogers the other night, wonderful academic, wonderful musicologist, incredibly bright, brilliant guy. And exactly at this time in college, his friends made a dartboard of different majors, because he was so interested in so many different things and couldn't decide. And they'd make him play darts every week. And he laughed. He said, the funny thing is, he actually kind of followed that for a while. So, oh, okay, I better concentrate on this week. So you just have to find this momentum. And not everybody gets to go to a high school, a performing arts high school. Nobody gets, and Duke Ellington, since it was the Duke Ellington Performing Arts School, was there a lot of his music and that genre? Was that a big deal?
No.
Tell us about the gospel thing. Tell us about the singing a lot of gospel music. I love gospel music, but go ahead.
Well, I didn't say, I grew up in the church, and we grew up singing gospel music, but I didn't personally sing a lot of gospel music, particularly when I started to sing, and I became interested early on in classical music. But what I was going to say to your point earlier is that I used to have a radio show for a series on XM called Voce di Donna, right? And I would speak with my colleagues about how it was that they became involved in this profession. And basically, This was the day I used to bring my DAT player with me and speak to, the costume designers, the lighting designers, the conductors. But nearly everybody had the same story.
Yeah.
I was 9 years old. I was 10 years old. I saw the red slippers. My parents took me to the musical theater. I heard opera. It's nearly all, that has been the common thread around 10, 11, 12, 13, something happens. You have there's exposure to something and it sticks. Jonathan Pell, you remember when you and I opened up the AT&T center together down there in Dallas, said to me, he believes it's DNA, that it either speaks to you or it doesn't. But I have found that more often than not, usually around that impressionable age time, you hear something, you see something, and it imprints right away, and you say, oh, that's it.
And the important thing is, a lot. I think it's really worth driving this point home, because guys, I'm talking to you, ladies and gentlemen, but also our younger colleagues that are watching this. Sometimes you just have to go out and grab that opportunity yourself and make that opportunity yourself. Because if you think there's even a spark of interest there, you're going to have to find it, because your school is probably not going to put you in a bus and take you to the opera dress rehearsal like they did Denyce. You're probably not going to have a German English teacher like I did. You said, well, you might like the German language set to, have you heard of Schubert? You might not have that epiphanal moment, but if you hear music in your heart and your head, and like most Americans, you grew up in some sort of church atmosphere and some sort of singing. My house was somewhere between, Protestant hymn books and Montevani and Frank Sinatra, and a little bit of Peter Nero on the side. My mother was an incredible pianist, and I have two older sisters, and they were both musical, especially my next older sister, who actually became a composer and, reads jazz charts and won competitions as a classical pianist and all that kind of stuff. She actually is the musical brains in the family. I'm just, I could memorize well. What can I say? But you really have to, and again, you have so many possibilities today to, if you just think of what's YouTube alone is just, even though most of it's stolen and it's illegal, but what the hell, we're in it right now. You've got streaming platforms. That is, and I'm, yes, shamelessly going to punch here, IDAGIO.com. IDAGIO.com is built for classical music, a user interface for classical music, built by classical musicians, right? And so when you're and there's over 20,000 classical composers on this website, the database. I didn't even know there were 20,000 classical composers. When I first started this series, I used to have part of it was at the end, have you ever heard of this person? And then we'd play a little excerpt of what they were. And that was a bit fun. But don't let somebody tell you not to listen, To
just get back to your point about jazz at Ellington, it was broader and at the time that I was there. Now they've incorporated many more disciplines into the curriculum there. But I mean, musical theater, for example, didn't really exist there at that time. It was mostly under a big classical umbrella, and they were fine arts is really what it was about when I was there. Now they've broadened so much more.
Right. So, and by the way, I didn't mean to insult Oberlin. It is a phenomenal music school. It is in the fields. I had a wonderful time there one time and gave a recital, and I really don't want to leave that hanging there. Oberlin is a great school. Boston is a different environment, and New England Conservatory is an extraordinary music school as well. I'm very near and dear to the colleagues and people there. Okay, we're now got Denyce Graves. When did you wake up and realize, my God, I think I'm Denyce Graves? Well, you know what I mean.
Waiting for that, perhaps.
Yeah, I know, we all do, but you know what I mean.
Well, there was a story which I shared a lot actually in high school, believe it or not. As I said, I was a very, very shy and awkward kid, and really kept to myself. And one day I was assigned, I sang on the student recital. Nina, remember? And there was a guy who was very popular in the school that everybody knew. And he came up to me afterward, after I sang, and in front of everybody said, we didn't even notice you. We didn't even know that you were here. And who knew that you had this voice in you? But he said this in front of everybody. And after that, people started saying, oh, they started calling me Miss Opera. Here comes Miss Opera. Here comes Miss Opera, But he sort of gave me a kind of validation and gave me some street cred, amongst the people in high school. So that was a moment where I thought, oh, wow, maybe there's something happening here. That was early on. But, as I said, I come from this religious background. And my mother, who is extraordinary, would tell us all the time that we were blessed children, that God kissed my throat, that, we were all destined to do something great and we were going to change the world. And she sort of really poured that into us all the time. So I even by the time that I got to Oberlin, and I felt really intimidated and really overwhelmed with the kids who had been at Interlochen and studying piano since they were 5, and, and I was just, that was not my story at all. And I still felt that I had something to offer, and because because my mother really instilled that doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you come from, you know, you have something important, you have an important mission here on the earth, and I think we all took that to heart and carried that with us, and we believed it. So
Did Minister Dad come to peace?
that's a complicated story.
I don't want to. I'm not trying to open. This is your life. I just couldn't. You know, I got it.
Complicated.
All right.
But he was proud later on. But I spent most of my life. I didn't really have a relationship with him, or did I really know him actually? You know.
And
But,
yet, I bet he was a hell of a minister.
oh yeah, my mother said he was quite the, you know.
Wow. So I see. Look, I'm not going to read. I mean, you can, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just quickly. Well, no, I'm going to go this way. You've got several wonderful honors and different places, but one that just stuck out. I mean, the Grand Prix Lyrique and the Eleanor Stieber. I think Eleanor Stieber is one of the most underrated American singers. But at the time of her life, she was not underrated at all. But she's not necessarily one of the top 5 names, or maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. It seems like she's gone into some sort of halcyon distance, and she was just an extraordinary lyric soprano. And of course, Samuel Barber's favorite soprano, along with Leontine and all those things. Anyway, Eleanor Stieber Music Award, that's fantastic. But I see this the Marion Anderson Award, which is also wonderful. But then, presented to her by Miss Anderson. And that gives me goosebumps. I mean, so I also want to say, I mean, you listen to Leontine as a 14-year-old, you get an award from Marion Anderson, an icon of American culture. You're friends with Leontine Price. I mean, what?
That was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. I remember being in the 4th grade, and at that time it was called Black History Week before it was and I remember learning about Marion Anderson in the 4th grade in Miss Hamer's class. And when I won that award, of course, later on, then I knew about Marion Anderson, particularly as I became involved in our profession. But meeting her was just an incredible, surreal experience. I felt as if I'd walked into the history books, you know. Again, I've shared this story too a lot, but it was extraordinary. I went to her home in Danbury, Connecticut. Oh, and by the way, I have a tree from her farm that's on my farm here. But anyway, that's another story. I went to her home in Danbury, Connecticut. I was going to sing at the Charles Ives Center that weekend. And I was very, 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 very nervous. I mean, I could hardly keep myself together. I just didn't know what I was going to do and what I was going to say. And I was just a mess. And I was greeted by her nursemaid, and I said, "Could you please tell me where the ladies' room is?" And as I was leaving the ladies' room, going to walk into the big parlor where I was going to have an audience with Miss Anderson, I could hear behind me the clicking of her walker, you know, click, click, click. And I was just too scared to turn around. And then I hear this voice that says, "Are you Denyce Graves?" I thought I was going to fall over. And then I turned, much like our beloved Ruth Bader Ginsburg, to find this teeny tiny woman. But
really?
With a voice, tiny at that point.
At that point, yeah.
I met her because she was already, you know, in advanced age by that time. This teeny tiny woman, but with this voice already very much intact, strong, commanding, bringing you to your knees, sort of, you know, resonance and presence in her sound. And somehow, like RBG, it did not fit, you know, this sort of, you know, tempest, you know, what is it? What is the expression?
Tempest in a teapot.
Yes, exactly. This sort of image. And I thought in that moment that I met her, it came to me, I thought, music was just her vehicle. We were supposed to know of this woman. We were just supposed to know who she was because she had such a commanding, already in her 90s, such an incredible presence, such command in her voice. You know, there are some people who walk in the room and they start speaking and everybody turns, or they laugh, and all of a sudden everybody goes quiet. And there was something in her spirit that just commanded your attention. And I just thought we were supposed to know of her because, you know, she didn't enjoy, you know, you and I spoke a little bit about one of the great architects of the civil rights movement, your Thurgood Marshall. She didn't enjoy or relish in sort of becoming the face or the poster child of the civil rights movement, because she herself was quite a very modest woman. But yet again, I just love that because of that, she became, you know, this face of this incredible movement, you know, after this whole business with the Daughters of American Revolution and the concert, you know, on the Lincoln Memorial, and that she herself sort of shied away from that she really wanted it to be about the music and not.
I believe that.
Yeah, right.
I think that's another very important story. I mean, it's if you and by the way, any of you wanting to study singing, I mean, we talk about Roland Hayes and George Shirley and Marion Anderson and Todd Duncan and, you know, all these wonderful iconic folks, and of course Sam and Estes, and the list gets longer, and it's all wonderful. And there are examples of, I just love. I don't love. I'm going to say this very sarcastically, and I just find it I've always found it an incredibly offensive thing to say, but well, they're a real credit to their race, you know, and yeah, exactly. It's like, it embarrasses me to say it. It's so bullshit. I just have to put it out there. But the point is, guys, if you want to hear some really outrageously phenomenal German leader singing, check out Roland Hayes singing Du bist die Ruhe, or check out Marion Anderson singing anything in German. My favorite recording, and I'm not a big one on favorites, but maybe it's just because it took me by surprise, but Marion Anderson's Gretchen am Spinnrade of Goethe, which now I of course teach ad infinitum every year in every class. Somebody's going to sing this song. And you want to say, look, if you like that song, how about the other 575 that, never mind. We'll get to that. Anyway, it's beautiful, beautiful saying. And you need to know these people because they were singers. Marion Anderson, I'm sure, would have said, well, I hope people remember me that I sang well. That I was a good singer, that I sang it right, and for the right reasons.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Absolutely. And when I spent that weekend with her, of course, I was bombarding her with questions, and she was as uninterested in talking about the business as anything. She was very much involved with the Salvation Army at that time and children. And she wanted to talk about the work that she was doing. What was important and relevant to her at that time was what she was presently doing. And
so you sang to her?
I did.
I mean, she was in the audience.
Was indeed.
Oh, Lord. And afterwards, how was that? Did she like it?
I hope she did. I didn't ever go to ask her. I was too scared, No.
You know what? If she'd had issues with it, you would have known.
I would have heard about it. Well, you know what she did, which was extraordinary? She gave me one of her gowns in her closet. She let me go shopping in her closet. I chose this Karenska gown.
I think she liked it, Denyce. I think she liked your singing. I think we can go with that. Move on. Go on. How was the gown?
Maybe 3 times. I've now since donated it to the Smithsonian. But we did a reenactment of
You donated the gown to the Smithsonian?
I did.
Is it? And her coat from the Lincoln Memorial is also with a purse. It's also in the Smithsonian, isn't it?
That is in the national, yes, the latest one, the last installment of the African American Museum of History and Culture. It's there.
By the way, that's also one of the last times that was one of my proudest moments, and because of the Library of Congress and Song of America, to be invited to sing with you on the groundbreaking of what became the Smithsonian African American Historical Museum. Yeah.
Right.
You know what? I got to tell you this. I knew this song, but I sat there. You remember lift every voice and sing? I'd never sung the damn thing. I'd never sung it in my entire life at all. And that wonderful Eastgate chorus came out and sang it, and because I'd sung with them a couple of times, and they sang this song, and my skin was just, I was just all over the. And then they said, "Oh no, and you and Denyce, you need to join the chorus in this." I thought I was going to, and Obamas were sitting up there on the podest, and I was thinking, this is one of my nights, and with you.
That's right, for the groundbreak. That is right. Oh my gosh, I've forgotten all the different things that you and I've done together.
Our paths, we have never gone on stage together.
Well, ish.
Well, that's true. We did the Dallas Gala.
The Dallas Gala.
What did we sing to? We did Macbeth together?
We did Macbeth, I know. I sang Cavalleria Rusticana. I did the big in Nejam.
I did the Te Deum. I think I did the Hamlet aria.
Yes.
But I think we only sang the Macbeth together. Did you ever do the role, lady?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
Because some mezzos have gone for it. I mean, you got to work yourself into it. Would be wonderful. Look, I don't want to lose track here. Another path that we crossed, you don't maybe even know about, is that when Richard Danielpour was writing a Margaret Garner, he was in Vienna, and he showed me arias and pieces. He said he wanted to talk about it. We were already by then pretty good friends, and he had written another piece that I had sung with Flicka and recorded, letters from her father who died in World War I. Yeah, elegies is what it's called. Beautiful.
Yes, right.
So he shows me, especially Edward, the plantation owner, the badass, big bad Edward, right? And his dream was that I would do it. And we worked through the arias, and he was very generous in that, because I said, that doesn't really work, does it? If Edward means this, wouldn't it go this way, or wouldn't we? We really just talked about, I don't compose and things, and I also encouraged him. I said, I think he should I think the music should betray the evil while he's trying to sound eloquent, and so Richard just took all that on board and loved it. But obviously when it got together, I couldn't be part of it. And of course that was a major operatic event that still I don't think has gotten its proper call. I was with Richard when he and Toni Morrison came to the Met, and they read and talked about it with Sarah Billinghurst because they were promoting it or proposing it to be a project. And the powers to be decided that it wasn't an adequate subject. I mean, hell knows what they decided, why they're doing something. Anyway, and then there was going to be recording, and I couldn't do that anyway. But I think there is a recording of the piece, isn't there?
No, there is not. That's really tragic. Heartbreak. That's a tragedy. We had several opportunities, but Danielpour was never happy with it because we had the occasion to do it live, and he didn't want it.
All right.
Yes.
Well, he's a very exacting guy, but as most composers, but.
Right. Yeah. That's a great heartbreak, because that was an incredible work.
Did it mean a lot to you?
I'm sorry?
Did it mean a lot to you?
Sure.
I mean, it was a story and an embracing, and it felt like an important story that needed to be told, no?
I don't know, out of all the sort of antebellum stories, why this one fell into obscurity. It was such an incredible story, so powerful, the most dramatic, the most expensive, I don't know how this story got lost. It really wasn't until Toni Morrison, sort of with the whole of the beloved text, that we began to hear about this modern day Medea. It's just an incredible story. Yes, I loved every second of it.
Are there even YouTube excerpts of it?
I've never
looked
like that, but I just did a masterclass last week for Roosevelt University, and one of the students sang one of the arias from.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun to work with her on that. But no, we had a fantastic time. Rod Gilfrey ended up singing the part that would have been your part. Greg Baker, and it was a wonderful group of people. Baker.
My God, what a talent! Look, I want to get some of the things that you're doing nowadays. I mean, you've opened up the Hamlin Palm series. You're singing Classical Action Benefit. You are, before we go, since this is about song, let's go back to. I mean, you sing a lot of songs. You've always sung all the different languages and the different. You really are passionate about song. We talk so much about opera, but my passion is that all young singers, any young singer will be a better opera singer if they've studied song. And any opera singer or any song singer will be better if they've studied some opera. I don't know about you, but I really hate this sort of zoiseling on pitch that we get in the name of lieder singing. I think it should be sung, as most composers, including the great Ned Rorem, would insist. But tell me about your passion about song.
Well, because I'm a mezzo-soprano, because there isn't, I mean, I started off with song, right? As a young girl.
What kind of songs? Early Italian stuff or German or French or what?
Everything. Started out with the 24 Italian hits, all that, folk songs, the Sally Gardens, all kinds of wonderful, wonderful material. And then that carried on into, undergraduate and then graduate school, because I did a lot of recital. Now, part of the reason, because of the voice type that I am, and because my voice is there wasn't a tremendous amount of material, certainly as a young singer, that was available to my particular kind of instrument. So I mostly have built my career doing recitals. That's really what I'm known for. I mean, people know me kind of for those two signature pieces.
Yeah, Samson Delilah and
right.
Carmen.
But the bulk of my career has been song recital. I love it more than anything. And you have the real opportunity there to create, these little mini recitals within these songs. And I've had the chance, I mean, as you know, it's just a treasure trove of material that's, I always say that I would love to have more lifetimes in this body to begin to start to scratch of everything that exists. Because there's so much rich information there, but I really love song recital. That's it.
What foreign language did you find the most comfortable?
I'm sorry?
What foreign language did you find the most comfortable? French. That's what I thought.
The language, I lived there, but also because the French composers were incredibly, they were more generous for the mezzo-soprano voice,
Sure.
Then Sanson, Berlioz, Satie, all of those who wrote Thomas, Massenet, who wrote for the mezzo-soprano protagonists where opera is concerned. So there's a tremendous amount of repertoire available for the mezzo-soprano voice in the French language. So I've had a big history there, and I suppose that's the language that I feel the most comfortable in. And I lived there, for a long time. And France and Paris in particular sort of feels like an adopted, adopted home country.
Yeah, adopted home, right? I didn't realize you lived there. Wonderful. Well, there you go. That's a wonderful, and yes, listen to songs, listen to people sing songs, get to know, learning the language. As sometimes I find in the conservatories, and maybe we can talk, I mean, you're mentoring a lot of singing. We can talk about teaching now. You're mentoring a lot of students. You're at the Peabody. You've been there for some time. You invited me a long time when you first started there, and that was a wonderful experience. But
and Juilliard too. I mean, also Juilliard.
And Juilliard, you're very involved in Juilliard. I mean, you're really having an impact on, as well as singing, on the younger generation, and that's important. What do you think is missing in singers' educations today, or do you think there's anything missing? If you could identify, I mean, every generation of teachers gets to do this. What is it that is there something that keeps showing up? Do you think this is too much of a trend to not discuss?
Oh, so
do you know what I mean?
I do. That's interesting, and thank you so much. I was just meeting this morning with some of the Juilliard singers, and well, you spoke earlier about the access of YouTube, and while there's this incredible availability of material that's there, I'm not sure, and I've said this, I'm not sure that the singers are really served by that. It depends. We go by rote. We had to go word for word, sit down on the floor with the dictionary, right? We didn't have all of, the Sharp and Harris,
the Nico Castell volumes,
and somebody does the IPA for you, and somebody else has, recorded the melody for you, and the piano tracks and all of this stuff. There's a lot that I would like to say about all of this. I oftentimes see it, and you alluded to this in the very beginning. You said a lot has to go right in order to build a career and to build a life, in this industry. And it's true. It's sometimes I see pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So I may see a great intellect come through the door. I may see somebody with wonderful sense of humor, someone who has the technique down, somebody else who has the heart, somebody else who has the industry, somebody who has just the sheer determination. And what I always want to do is take all of that and make that into one, right? So there are a couple of things. First of all, I think there's a little bit perhaps, don't be so mad at me, everybody, of entitlement from this other generation. I think that there's something to be said for having to, be absolutely thorough with sitting down. When we learned the languages, because you had to sit down and translate word for word and really understand, what it was that you were, what the story was and what that poem was. And I think sometimes because things are so available, there may not necessarily be the same appreciation, for it because somebody else has done that hard work. But I don't think that has to be the case, because I've had some students who just come in and are hungry and, they eat everything up. And that is a delight and a wonderful thing to see also when you see someone who arrives that's passionate, that has it all together, that has the talent, that has the enthusiasm and the fire, for it, who has this incredible will. And, so that is, when you see that happen, and when you see that in a young person, you want to do everything that you can to support them, help them along, their journey. And I think probably most people feel that way, so that's always really exciting to see. I would love to sort of impart that how much work there is to be done. And I tell young singers all the time, your job is, and your only job really, is yourself and your voice. You don't have the time to look at what somebody else is doing or to be concerned with if you are really investing your time in yourself and your own development, you really don't have the time or the interest to worry about what someone else is doing. So that's the first thing that I would say. If I had a chance to do it all over again, I would work much harder. And I would learn much more, right? So that's the one thing that I would say. And the other thing I would say is to not worry so much. How can you say that?
In this world, it's a horrible industry.
People evolve when they are scheduled to evolve. You can't skip any steps. I was telling this young man earlier today that, you can't fast track this thing. Either you put in your 10,000 hours or 20,000 hours or 30,000 hours. There's no way to, either you get up on the stage and you can deliver it, or you can't. And we know if you've read the synopsis or if you've
I like that. You can't fast track this thing. That's fabulous. That's great.
Not at all. You put in the time, you either put that in or you don't. And at the end of the day, you can either do this or you can't. And when it's time to be up there on the stage and when the lights are shining on you and it's time to deliver, we know. Because the stage, right, is a magnifying glass, and we know who's done the work, right? We can tell if the technique is worked out, if you know the languages, if you know word for word what you are singing about.
Right here. The word language. This is something that gets me with my young American colleagues, because they become diction engineers in 25 languages. And those are that's important. And the facility, and especially also the Rosetta Stone for singers of the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, that is something that my young colleagues in Europe, they don't study, they don't know. And it's remarkable because it's illuminating to your singing technique as well. I mean, dentals, you don't, the D's and the N's and the T's and the L's. Guess what? You don't need to move your whole jaw and reinvent your voice every time you go through a consonant. Besides all of that, it's this idea that, crossing the T and dotting the I, the way it works, is the same as understanding why the poet chose those words in that language. And I think that diction is an incredibly important vehicle. It's like the Google map, but you got to actually take the hike. You've got to go on. It's got to mean something. That's, Roland Hayes and Marion Anderson spoke languages. Roland certainly spoke German. I'm not just keeping holding them up as examples. It's that language is as musical as the musical language of music. And this is incredibly important. And the other thing is, even in working with kids in opera, I don't know about you, but I just hope we're not going backwards sometimes, because there's an awful lot of people in our industry, and I'm not going to say I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. There's an awful lot of people in our industry in positions of appointment or hiring or decision making that are not musicians. They are not necessarily even completely beguiled by what we do. And there's a certain gladiator sport that is always at the edge of what we do. It's phenomenal that this or that voice can sound like this or that in that auditorium, and that phenomenon itself can be, for someone who doesn't particularly care about the story of what's happening on stage, perhaps enough. But in fact, I like to hear people think in a language called music.
Oh, right.
You know what I mean? And I find that in our younger generation. I'm not pointing a finger. It's what motivates me, and what I just to say that to my younger, and very often you'll see the eyes kind of go, oh yeah, okay, so why did, tell me that story. Very often you'll find yourself saying, does that make sense to you?
It does make sense to me. Of course, right now we're in a very interesting moment in history, but that sort of education really only comes, I think, by going to the country and being there and having to work there and having to speak there and having to get along. You can study it, but when you have to speak it, that's the greatest education. It's the same way with going to the stage, to work in the studio with your voice teacher and to work with the coaches is one thing. There's another education entirely when you get to the stage, when you're there. And yeah. Again, wow. Right. You can only.
That's been my. And singers don't become singers unless they sing. And that's the greatest tragedy of COVID and also the industry. There's not nearly as many opportunities for young singers to go out and mess up as there used to be. I still have a tear in my eye when I think of the community concert series that was simply, they pulled the plug on it, Columbia artists, because it wasn't financially viable.
And Columbia
it wasn't financially viable because it was so abused at so many levels, and so many people trying to make money on places they should have just kept concentrated on the concert. But never mind, that's all dead and gone. But I'm concerned that our young colleagues, especially young song singers, don't have as much opportunity to try repertoire, get their feet wet, know what it's like to go out there and sing. Does that sound right to you?
I understand that. I understand where you're coming from. But what I tell young singers all the time is, if you want to sing, sing. There's nothing that prevents you from doing that. In other words, when I was a student at New England Conservatory, we used to hold these little lieder albums in our apartment, and we'd invite.
Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about. Are they doing that?
That I don't. Well, it's a different world now, and I don't know that you can do it that way.
Are you able to do that at Peabody?
Yeah, I think that, people's churches, I'm always encouraging young people to get out there and sing, and challenge yourself each and every time, even if there are two people, in the audience, it doesn't matter. I used to do these little lieder albums to just run through my package of 5 arias, and invite regular people in. And sometimes it's the untrained ear that I trust more actually than the trained ear. But and just run through your material and just give yourself a recital. One thing that I've found in teaching is that the students' growth exponentially jumps off the chart when they are with it, where there's something that they are planning for. If they've got a recital, or if they're working
Yeah,
for,
sure.
or if they have something that they're working towards, then I see the growth really jump up. And I tell the students that whether it's part of the curriculum or not, we're going to do a recital.
Good.
Even if it's 30, 40 minutes, we're going to do it. Even if we do it outside of the studio and it's just us. But for you to learn this material, learn all kinds of material, memorize it, learn it thoroughly, and have the opportunity to perform it, then you can take it home, take it to your church, take it to your community center. There's nothing, you have to be, and I think we're seeing that now, that today's young singers are being called to this moment. We need their innovation, we need their imaginations and their creativity, because while I think we're going to come out of this, I don't think we're going to be the same. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think the industry is changing. You mentioned Columbia artists earlier. We've seen that tower fall down. That's been incredible, an incredible happening, in the business. And we're going to start to see audiovisual being folded into the curriculum, no doubt about it. That we have to learn to become more tech savvy. All of that's happening. And so this new crop of this new generation of singers, I'm telling them all the time, we need your present. We need you present right now, because you guys are going to reshape how this thing goes. But there are certain things that remain and that are going to be fundamental, no question about it. And if you want to sing, you can create ways and opportunities for yourself, even if the community concerts are gone.
Since you're well put and wonderful, I want to ask you two questions. First, the first I'll ask I ask my young colleagues very often, there's so many of you that want to sing. I mean, and so many we want to study. And I do these, I have a couple of programs, and you get, that I run, and you get 125 applicants, and you can only take 10 or 12. I mean, that hurts. But so but the point is just a lot of people, and the New World Symphony is a great example of instrumentalists, and everybody's trying to get in and being fellowships. I mean, there's just no dearth of young people who want to learn how to be professionals or want to be just really great musicians. So I asked them, how many of their non-musical colleagues go with them to concerts? How many do they take with them? Why is there such a disconnect of these different activities in our younger generation? I mean, I remember having a lot of friends who didn't have a thing no interest whatever in music, but we would go to concerts together. We'd go to the film together as well. I mean, there's all sorts of things we would hang out with, but it wasn't weird. This idea that we're losing our young public or we're not developing our young public, I think is a very interesting conversation, but somehow it starts with us, and you ask my opinion.
I'm smiling because you said film. Do you remember when you and I went to the film in New York? Do you remember? You don't remember. I can tell by your expression.
Where did we go?
Doing something, and we were going to spend an evening, go to the film, and you wanted to read every review. And I kept saying, Thomas, come on, it's getting late. Like, let's just go to the movie. But you wanted to. You don't remember this? I don't. Yeah.
It must have been in the Hamlet period. I mean, when else would have been hanging in Europe? And we were in England, weren't we? Yeah, we recorded in England.
And we had Janine Rice too with us, who's now passed. Remember? Oh. Yeah. We were trying to decide if it was Hamlet.
Of course, she was on the recording, and wonderful Tony Dalmeida, who also passed not too long after that, actually. But Tony died 15 years ago. Yeah, he just kind of I think probably he had one of the bad cancers, like pancreatic or something. And yes, and blessed Janice, bright and lucid and sardonic as she was to the end of her days, died. But she was one. I learned so much from her. But anyway, I didn't like to go unannounced to films and just waste time.
With that by you didn't.
How's that?
I was very impressed by that. I will tell you that. I was very impressed that you didn't want to waste your time unless it was something that was worthy of the time,
Oh, that's very funny. Hey, I said, what are we going to do about young kids going to concerts? Why don't they go?
interesting. And
Why doesn't a young lawyer go to concerts?
That's a very interesting challenge, and that's really great. And thank you for bringing that up. And I'm going to challenge my students about that too, because you've had this experience. I'm sure you've had it hundreds of times where people come to you backstage and say, "This is my first opera," and I had no idea.
Yeah.
How many times have you heard that? Or this was my first song recital and I loved it,
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's important. We know that I'm doing lots of work for American for the Arts in bringing really awareness of the profile of the importance of arts and education. But of course, that there is preaching to the choir. But it's true that, we have to engage and involve other people in order for this art form to survive. We see a lot of educational outreach going on in opera companies, and certainly in a lot of regional houses here in America. We see a lot of that going. That's one thing that's very impressive. When we did the Margaret Garner that you spoke about, the Richard Daniel Court, that was in all of the public schools there. They invited all the school kids. And there were other kids like me who were fortunate enough to go see Beethoven's Fidelio, who became musicians of some sort. And so we know that that's important. We know that that can make an incredible impression. And so we see that happening, certainly on a regional level. I see that happening with a lot of my students who are doing young artist programs where they're going out into community centers, even still right now, even outside and going and introducing and exposing people to the opera. And so that is wonderful. That's encouraging. How that translates into sales, I don't exactly know. It would depend on, the house, and I don't know. But I am encouraged to see that is happening. But we should all make it. We should make it a habit that whenever we're performing or students are performing, that we say, "Look, we're going to bring some."
Well, I think that, I think there's two issues. And since this program is a cooperation with the Hampson Foundation, I can't help but I'd be remiss not to say along the lines that you're working with AmericansForTheArts.org and Arts Edge at Kennedy Center, which are wonderful programs. Yeah, I think that people misunderstand that what our desire to get music and the arts back into the classroom is because it benefits the rounding and the understanding and empathy of life in general. And too much of our education process is about which line are you going to go down, which lane do you belong in, and ergo, oh well, music. Well, we can't possibly know that the 12-year-olds they don't know going to be a musician or not. That's not the point. And so, also part of the problem of the audience development is there's no reason for these kids. I mean, if you've missed the bug or the awareness of it by the time you're 13 or 14, you're going to be so horribly distracted being a young adult and adolescent until somewhere in your 20s when you start asking the question, what's it really all about? Then you might be interested in the arts again. And that no man's land is I think a very dangerous. Well, I think it's a dangerous couple of generations that we've done that to. We're seeing it evidenced in politicians that we have in Congress. They don't even know what we're talking about. They don't understand the question. They don't understand the problem. And one of the things I found really challenging, and I love, and what I do with the Hampson Foundation is I actually have figured a way, because I believe that arts are actually evidence of cultures and evidence of the times, not something you get into, but actually something that tells you what you've already been part of. And so we teach teachers how to teach sociology or history or economics or whatever through poetry and music. And, we literally build them 10-minute curriculum templates so they can get in and get out, so that if they're teaching, whatever period of American history, you can drop the needle on a poet who's been thinking about that, and a composer that made it sound like that. And of course, you get cross-generational conversation, and the whole Hampson Foundation, especially songofamerica.net, is built as a timeline of American history. And that's gotten a lot of resonance with teachers. They appreciate smuggling music back into the curriculum. So I think, you and I are obviously cut from the same cloth, and that we're trying to invigorate that stuff where the excitement can happen. You can't make somebody curious, but you can certainly create the atmosphere in which curiosity is born. And that's paraphrasing a quote from Leonard Bernstein, the great teacher. The other thing, the second question I want to ask you, and I don't mean to take up so much of your time, and we're dribbling over a little bit, but what do you expect with two loquacious colleagues? One of the passions I have at the foundation and in repertoire and so forth is the canon of African American creativity in especially classical music in America. Have you, as you were doing a lot of recitals and do a lot of recitals, I know that spirituals are, if you pardon the expression, low-hanging fruit. But have you had a chance to expose people to some of the amazing, even contemporary African American composers that are with us? You know, the Hale Starks and the Adams and the, you know, I mean, it's just it's a list that doesn't. And do you know Louise Toppin?
You not personally. Some of my students were students of hers, so it's spectacular. So
I got to get you guys together.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this, and thank you so much for what you're doing with Hamsung, and thank you for this question. So one of the things that's happened now at Peabody, the answer is, of course, yes. I do it all the time, and again, there's so much information. There's so much gorgeous material, you know, that's there. But one of the things that we're doing now at Peabody Conservatory, for example, is folding that into the curriculum. So if we have, you know, an art song competition, which we do have, that there's a section for African-American composers, and that everybody, you know, working with the librarian and bringing in all of this material. And so it's educating everybody. And so I love that, and I'm excited. I'm excited about that, but absolutely, I do that quite a lot on my own programming. You know, years ago, when I was a student actually at our Oberlin College, I'd given a recital. I was trying to raise money to come to Graz, Austria, actually. But
all right.
This elderly Black
Ames Institute,
because my teacher, Helen Hodem, was teaching there. This elderly African-American man came up to me after the concert and said, "Miss Graves, I enjoyed the concert, blah, blah, blah. But I noticed that you didn't sing any spirituals or any music by African-American composer." And I said, yeah, exactly. And whoever he was, God bless his wonderful soul. You know, I was young, you know, 19, 20 or something at the time. And I've never forgotten that, and because of that, I always make sure that I programmed. So he was an angel, you know, that came and said, "Look," he said, "if we don't do this, who's going to do it? You have a responsibility." And
I'm still having that useless conversation with my Italian colleagues. They don't sing their songs. Pizzetti, Banci, Wolfgang Ferrari, Respighi. You know, that you can tell the whole story of Risorgimento in the 19th century through song. No Italians sing their damn songs. They're not recording them, you know, some other people do it, but, you know, tell me the last recital where famous singers, Italian singers of this generation or less, came out and just handed a half of recital of their repertoire. I mean, it just drives me nuts. Even Cecilia doesn't do it. It drives me crazy. It's phenomenal repertoire. It's so beautiful.
Is that the same across the board? Would you say the same for French and for German and for Russian?
No, the French and the German sing their songs. The melody and the German Lied. In fact, they sing it. They're so afraid to sing. You'll get Germans and French singing each other's language, but they're very afraid of singing in English. Some of them, some of the younger baritones, they've brought me Nebrorum songs and some English songs, and it's really wonderful to hear that, and it should be. And we work on the English language in the same way that we work on the German language, and you know, it's so important. But the Italians, you know, I mean, Luca is an extraordinary example, an exception to it. Luca Pizzaroni, my son-in-law, you know, he's one of the few Italians, if not the only Italian I know, who would sing an all Schubert recital at Wigmore. You know, so it is, you know, again, if it's about singing and singing stories in the songs, I think you can break through that. But, you know, we have to be honest, the whole sung thing, you know, that's the, I don't want to pick on Fischer Dieskau because I admire him so much and knew him quite well and all that. But there was something that all became sort of a Wissenschaft. It became a science. because of he and Schwarzkopf and everything. And even I remember people being horribly critical at the community concerts because, oh, well, those famous singers go out and they sing everything from Schubert to their Verdi arias, and then they go home and sing Cole Porter. And I always sort of said, and the problem is what? I mean, I just think that I think we have to be about singing and not about, or be about the forest, not a bunch of tree scientists all the time.
I think that's happened in this period of pandemics on many levels, actually.
Right.
This sort of wokeness and this, raised awareness of
Right.
Other or inclusivity. And so we're seeing that happen, and I'm seeing that be reflected from large organizations, from Opera America and the like, where people are really making a concerted effort to absolutely fold in and to make it to make a point of, we're going to look at African-American conductors, we're going to look at African-American women composers, we're going to make a point that this is going to be a part of our program. So I see that happening. I see that, and I am encouraged by that. I see that happening around.
I think you're right, and I think the Black Lives Matter has also had a splash effect in our industry and our awareness. I think when we come out of this dark cloud, that there's going to be a genuine interest in a wider repertoire of what we call American classical music. I mean, gee, golly gosh, maybe we'll have 2 orchestras in the entire country in the same season playing the Dawson Negro Symphony. Who knows, much less William Grant Still, William
Grant Still, because from Oberlin College, we had to do a lot of that because he was an Oberlin grad. But anyway, Terrence Blanchard has for the first time.
Isn't that fabulous?
You
He's
know,
in Manhattan. I'm very busy at Manhattan, like you are at. Well, no, I'm not that busy. I mean, I'm just involved with Manhattan. You're very dedicated to your studio at Peabody. I don't have a studio. If I was going to have one, I'd probably be in Manhattan or maybe University of Michigan. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We've got all sorts of projects going on. I love them. But Blanchard is up at Manhattan, and of course they're busting with pride. And he's an amazing composer. But also Jason Moran, who also played at the groundbreaking. He's at Manhattan. And I said, how would you like to do Dichterliebe? And he said, oh, wouldn't that be interesting? And I said, I would love to do it with you, but if the second half can be the same kind of cycle that you write. And we talked about it twice. And then, of course, as our lives just get busy. But can you imagine Jason Moran making a song cycle? It would be phenomenal. It would be unbelievably beautiful. And you could easily find in the Harlem Renaissance poets, easily find an exact duplicate of the Dichterliebe in through their poetry. That kind of thing, sort of gets me going and exciting.
Oh, that's wonderful to think.
That'd be fun. All right, let's go to some of the fun stuff. You're amazing. You are the go-to person for specials and memorials and things that mean something to you. I love it. We're both also, by the way, Opera for Peace advisors. I don't know where that. I hope it's a wonderful organization. Julia's amazing. I'm waiting to see where I can help be of something. But that's another point. I know what I have to ask you. You did Steve Blyer, that unbelievable, talented genius. I mean, and the New York Festival of Song is an amazing organization. I've never worked with him. Steve and I have done a couple of things that we've been thrown at together and admire one another. But he did send me a note the other day. He had heard a WQXR show I was on. And I hooked up to this series that he's done electronically. And who should kick off the Black Market show but you?
Isn't that something? Well, that was a last minute thing, and I was thrilled to be a part of it. I think originally.
How did it work? Tell us how it was put together. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. And tell us originally. Tell us the story about it.
They had decided on this theme, and they had chosen the material, actually.
Right.
And so he said to me, Denyce, we'd love for you to sing this piece. And I said, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? There's no way. I mean, Nina Simone is one of my heroes.
Yeah.
I said, he made this piece iconic. I mean, there's no way. And I didn't want to sing it like an opera singer, right?
Yeah.
I said, it's not going to work that way. And I said, okay, let me take a look at it and see what we can do. And actually I found it to be very, very liberating. And it was a real gift to me in the end because of its message also. So that really gave me permission to sort of step outside of what I normally do,
Right.
sort of fleshing out this piece because the message is just so powerful. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free.
It was wonderful. Where did you record it?
Yeah, so that was quite something. I recorded it at Church of the Redeemer here in Baltimore on North Charles Parkway because one of my colleagues at Peabody, her husband is a minister there, and no, she didn't play. But that was Joanne Armani. She is a good friend. She's fantastic. She's been my rehearsal pianist for years, and she does church music, and that's the sort of thing she does, improvises. And the thing about it that made it the most difficult was, I think trying to edit it, each take was different because she played something different every single solitary time.
I love it.
Ever the same,
But actually the whole cut starts with Steve playing.
No, not that one. Not that one. Not that one. He did that for everyone else. Originally, it was going to, because originally he'd planned, I think Julia Bullock was going to, a spectacular talent, spectacular.
I've had her on the series. She's wonderful. And by the way, she's also somebody who saw you when she was a child and went, "Oh my God, I can do that too." I'm serious. I'm dead serious, girl. And Speedo Green, pull his strings sometime about Denyce Graves. The boy starts crying.
Power of Arts and Education. Look at what it did in that life. Well, that was an extraordinary story.
I found a conversation I love talking with. We've actually sung on stage a couple of times in Vienna, but it's very emotional. I mean, it's just such a, and he's emotional because he's so genuine. I mean, he's just so wonderful.
Yeah, I love it.
You did it, girl. You did it. You were standing there doing what you were supposed to do because your mother was right. God said you're supposed to do it, and you were doing it, and those kids' lives were changed.
And they themselves are now doing the same for the next generation. And so art pays itself forward in that way, and so we're all being used towards and that's beautiful and that's gorgeous. But his life in particular is such an example, Speedo Green,
unbelievable,
of the power of music and arts and education and how that can take a life and turn it around entirely. I mean, that's what it did to me too.
No, he's an amazing. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, and young colleagues, all of these conversations I've had since March, every Tuesday since March, focusing on song and singers and colleagues. And in June, we were especially concentrating on Black Lives Matter. And it wasn't just a political thing. I really wanted to genuinely ask, and I probably could ask you too, this sense of other as an African American within the the American community, and how that impacted their development as artists. Anthony McGill was unbelievably eloquent about it, and we all learned from him enormously. But I want to say something else. That all these things are online. You can go look them up. Go have a look at Julia. I had a show with Julia Bullock and Anthony McGill together. Speedo Green was alone. We kind of went on like this for an hour and a half, and it all goes up. It stays on. We can go on as long as we want until somebody comes and shoots me or shoots you or something. I don't know. I guess that's not very funny right now, but never mind. Anyway, you can access these conversations I'm talking about. Just go onto the IDAGIO Live YouTube. From September on, this conversation you can always visit on hamsongfoundation.org Facebook page. But anyway, that's just a brief service announcement.
What made you want to be curious? I'm curious as to why you felt a responsibility to speak to this incredible issue of otherism and Black Lives Matter. I'm curious as to what was sparked in It said,
because it's so obscene. My whole life, I can intellectually, and having studied political science and being a historian, maybe it was a blessing that I was raised in Washington State, which is a bit removed from everything. So and I'm substantially older than you are. I remember the Watts riots. I remember the 68, I remember all the death season, watching it on television. And I remember the Kent State, and I missed Vietnam by literally 9 months. I was always already looking for options of I wasn't going to be drafted. And I had not several, but a couple of close friends that were drafted and were dead within 6 weeks. And I wasn't going to do that. So I was it'd be funny. I got drafted. All right. I should say I got in another way drafted. All of a sudden there's a knock on my door, and somebody from the Marine Glee Club or whatever the chorus or whatever it is, was calling to see whether I'd be interested in auditioning and explain the process and so forth. That seemed a little bit desperate to avoid the draft, but I wanted to go into the Air Force. If I had to go to the military, I was going to go into the Air Force, but I was too tall to be a pilot. And who the hell wants to be a navigator? So a pilot's can only be 6'2", and I'm 6'4", so I couldn't do that. So my options were limiting, but fortunately it was clear that Kissinger and Nixon were going to pull something out of the hat. So that never became an issue. This show is not about me. It's about you. Racism I was raised in a completely non-racist household. I've never understood it. I find it obscene. I also am a passionate American, and I believe very strongly in the Declaration of Independence. I'm an admirer of our founding fathers. I've always taken that all men are created equal very seriously. The obscenity of human abuse to one another is something that's in my. I'm almost equally as passionate to the Jewish history. I am not Jewish. I was raised in a very similar religion, Seventh-day Adventist, and the Jewish law is very close, but I identify very, very closely with the abuse of cultures. And in our culture, I think it gained a lot of momentum. For 20 years or so more, I've been passionate about the Song of America and studying American history through poetry and through music. And it just is so obvious of the loss of our general population to them, that they don't know all this miracle of music and creativity in the African American community, or that what they do know has been put into some sort of funnel as, them bitching or celebrating, or they say it that way when they do that, or they dance this way, or they, and them. And that's just bullshit in America. That's just not who we are. It's e pluribus unum, or it's nothing. And it doesn't mean, unum does not mean homogenization. It means out of the many and different, there's a celebration of the common spirit. And this is the story of our arts and letters. This is the story of creativity in America. And the African American canon of creativity is just once again, an obscenely neglected miracle of our culture. Langston Hughes is an American poet. Langston Hughes' poetry is my poetry. He happens to be also an amazing African American in his time. William Grant Still is an American composer. And all this other bullshit, when I would do these Summer of America concerts, and I still do actually, but even with the Library of Congress, I would have some time to talk to the audience, and you will love this. And I would sing a couple of William Grant Still's songs. One of them, "Grief," which is I sang it for the Smithsonian.
Uh-huh.
Unbelievable A minor, weeping angel on pinions trailing and head bowed low in your hand, on I think a County Cullen poem, and people, you can hear people almost start to cry. You can hear the sniff, and I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful song. So I would tell the story. Can you imagine, in my lifetime, I've had the pleasure of having people write music for me, and we'll work on it together. I can't imagine what it would have been like there's so much I would like to ask, unfortunately, past composers, and William Grant Still is one of them. He's got a note in there that there's two endings, and I've become convinced of what his granddaughter is very passionate about, that it doesn't go to the B at the end. And I said, so I tell them this story, and they kind of get into it. I said, but just imagine when he wrote that song in the 40s, I would have gone over to his house in Los Angeles, a very deeply religious man, and visit. I'm sure he would have said, thank God you came, and we have a good time, and he would show me some other things, and then I would tell him, well, I'm going to do this song, Mr. Still, in a recital, and would you come down and listen to me sing it? Well, absolutely, son, he would say, and so we'd go out the door and we'd catch the bus, and he'd get in the back and I'd get in the front. I can't live in that world.
Thank God.
We cannot live in that world, right? So,
we're speaking.
and you could hear a pin drop every time I did that. A pin drop. I mean, and I have to tell you, 92% of the audiences were white, obviously, and so it was good. Look, we're Americans. This is what we do, and we need to right the ship again and move forward. And Black Lives Matter. It's Black music matters, and Black voices matter, and all voices matter. There's no, this clever question. Well, don't all lives matter? Well, hell yes. And if you're fighting cancer, does that mean throat cancer is worse than gut cancer? It's all shit. Get rid of it. Move on. Rejoice in the ecumenical part of our society. I find the arts and letters in our country just a phenomenal diary of every generation asking these questions.
Absolutely. And I think what was so powerful about what you said about, Grant Still or whomever, or that they are Americans, and that is important. I think that's important for us to know. It's to stop creating this us and them scenario.
Us and them.
Right. That's.
So, I'm sorry for the lecture, but you pulled my string. We've had such a wonderful conversation. It would be remiss if we didn't have you're so busy. You've had your own radio show. You give lectures and lecture recitals. You're wonderful. It's wonderful. I admire you and enjoy every time I cross anything you do. I did not know that you had a cooking program. And I do want to do a quick screen share so that everybody can see you in an apron. Where are we? Here we are, Safari. And we're going to share. We're about done, ladies and gentlemen, but you can't, look at this. Is this not absolutely wonderful? And here she is.
Who go to bed hungry and cry themselves to sleep.
Oh, I caught you singing. I was saying this poem at the end of, this was your Sugar, Spice, and Leontyne Price. What was this poem? I can back it up.
Marion Wright Edelman, remember, from the Children's Defense Fund. She wrote.
Sorry, you cut out. You cut out. Say all that one more time.
A poem for children by Marion Wright Edelman from the Children's Defense Fund. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful poem.
Your husband's in the background, your good friends in the background. You have the most wonderful kitchen. That's a great apron. Let's just listen to a little bit here.
Who don't like to be kissed in front of the carpool.
Yeah,
who
sure.
squirm in church or at temple and scream into the phone. Whose tears we sometimes laugh at, and whose smiles make us cry. Whose tears I just dropped my paper, as has happened before, and I'll see if we can get, that happened the very first episode. Oh, no. Who gets visits from the tooth fairy. Who don't like to be kissed in front of the carpool. Who squirm in church and in temple, and who scream into the phone, whose tears we sometimes laugh at, and whose smiles can make us cry. We pray for those whose nightmares come in the daytime, who will eat anything, who've never seen the dentist, who aren't spoiled by anyone, who go to bed hungry and cry themselves to sleep, who live and move but have no being. We pray for children who want to be carried, and for those who must. For those we never give up on, and for those who don't get a second chance. For those we smother, and for those who will grab the hand of anyone kind enough to offer it. Remember, like Princess Tiana lights up when she talks about her dreams. Embrace your dreams and the desires of your heart and make that your experience. All right, very
That's
good.
wonderful.
Did we have some bread here? So we've got bread, we've got our wonderful gumbo, we've got our wonderful rice to go along with the gumbo, we've got a beautiful salad that came directly from the garden outside, our lettuces came from the garden, our zucchini flowers come from the garden, and we have our wonderful gumbo here, which looks delicious as I'm gonna jump inside of this pot.
I'm sorry to stop you. It makes me hungry watching this clip. So tell us about the series you're doing and how many have you done already? And that one was a tribute to Leontine Price, and you've had Francesca Zambello, our mutual friend, and our admiration of her is enormous.
You were in a small clip. You were in a small clip talking about.
Well, there was a film. There was a film about her, but I barely remembered that when I saw it, and I went, "Oh, that's right. We talked about Francesca."
At the beginning of COVID, I was checking in with my students just to see how everybody was doing, and I felt, of course, like everybody did, so badly, particularly for the ones who just graduated and the ones who were just about to embark on their careers. That was aborted right away, and all of a sudden there was this stillness, and nobody sort of knew what the next move was going to be. And so I wanted to do something that would bring a sense of community and healing just amongst the kids in my studio. So I started doing some virtual projects, and we did that. And then I wanted to do something that would give the students a platform to display some of their talents. That particular episode was done with a student of mine, Simone Brown, who's created a business called Black Princess Parties. And that she's done where she does this virtually, where she will read a story of one of the Disney princesses, where she portrays all of the Disney princesses, because she talked about her life growing up and wanting to be one of the Disney princesses, but there was no Disney princess of color. Later, we got Princess Tiana. And so created this company called Black Princess Parties, where she would go and sing at birthday parties or special, events for young girls, or as I said, reading them stories, and dressed up as one of the Disney princesses, Cinderella or Ariel or whomever. And so this episode was called Sugar, Spice, and Leontine Price because this particular character, the Disney character, actually in her story wants to open up a restaurant in New Orleans, and she makes beignets and gumbo and that sort of thing. The gumbo recipe was from the Metropolitan Opera's cookbook, in which they submitted her gumbo recipe. The sugar and spice were, of course, the beignets. And so it was about everything that we've talked about art paying itself forward, about how one generation hears the next generation, is inspired by that generation, and then they later become the inspiration for the up and coming generation. So it was really about each one teaches one, right? This whole idea. And that's really what that episode was really about children, and about the responsibility that we all have, whether we choose that or not, that we are role models, and the children are watching us, and they are watching our behaviors. They're not so much listening to what we say, but they're watching what we do, and that we have to become examples in that way in our behaviors. And so really that's what that was about. And so it was something that I created as a vehicle really for my students, to excite them, to create a community, and to create a platform where they could sing. Basically, I talk about, there's an intro where, I show a video about their work or about whatever their passion projects are, and get an opportunity, to introduce them. And we've built up an audience of 250,000 viewers, and that's been spectacular, and it's been so well received. All of them are now archived on YouTube, but so I've just sent out a survey as to whether we should do a season 2 or not, because it was exhausting work, beautiful, beautiful work. And what we've learned, and the people that I've met, and what I've learned about myself has been spectacular. I mean, just been a beautiful, beautiful endeavor. So all singers love to eat. We got to eat, and we love to cook. And where does everybody end up? What's considered to be the heart of the home, right? The kitchen, the place that nourishes us. So I wanted this to be an event that nourished the soul, that fed us differently, right? So that was that whole metaphor, and that's where the whole idea comes from, of getting to the heart and to what feeds us and what gives us all life, right? Music and art, right? Along with the food that nourishes our body. So
I know no better sentence better to end this wonderful conversation than that one. It's all about that, folks. And hopefully our conversation has amused you and made you more curious and maybe more hungry for all sorts of things. Then we will have served our purpose. Denyce, I love you. Been wonderful.
I love you too.
Take care of yourself. Hope to physically see you soon.
Soon enough.